here on this morning. Thank God for this Friday, right? And thank God for another day that He has made. And we're so grateful to God, and we definitely are rejoicing, and we're so grateful to God to be in it. So, listen, we need everybody to share from wherever you are. We are on a new platform. This is a new season, a new year. We're on a new platform so that we can reach more people for the gospel of Jesus Christ, for the kingdom of God. And so we're just so excited. So this is all new on today for us. And guess what? I am the one that is hooking everything up. So I don't have any tech help today, but glory be to God, right? And so, listen, we're asking everyone, because again, this is a new platform, and we're asking everyone to please, 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 please share. I don't know what I'm doing, but I need your help on today. I'm excited to have with us on this morning Jeremy Hollister. He is a part of Art Speak Creative. You all know that we had Jason Bowman with us a week before, and we had a very, very, very exciting conversation. So I'm just so grateful to God for being able to continue the conversation with one of Jason's colleagues, Jeremy Hollister. And so, Jeremy, good morning, and thank
Good
you.
morning.
So I'm going to ask you, while I'm trying to spread the live, because we're on a new platform again this morning.
Sure.
We're going to ask you at the same time, while multitasking, to introduce yourself to our listeners. And again, thank you for accepting our invitation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on today. And boy, I'm glad I'm glad you were able to get Jason on last week. It's a tough act to follow up, as Jason is the owner partner of the company. I'm a strategist team lead as part of Art Speak Creative, and have been with the team for 2.5 years. But really, my background and my heart is for ministry and for the local church. So prior to Art Speak Creative, I spent 17 years full time on staff at 3 different churches, and primarily in children's, youth, family, young adult ministry. So serving the young generation. And so when you reached out to us and asked us to be a part of this conversation, I'm really excited because now with Art Speak, I'm able to see things from a perspective, and being able to help churches that I didn't have 17 years. And communication wasn't always clear, no matter what size church I was and just the tools and reaching people with communication and empathy and all those things that Jason talked to you about. So really just the heart of ministry. And that's really the heart of Art Speak. Art Speak Creative, we are ministers. There's ministers that are licensed practicing ministers on our team, as well as those that are volunteers or part-time staff at their church. And so we really do have the heartbeat of the local church. So I'm excited to dive into this conversation today.
Oh,
Oh, and
wow.
then a little bit about myself. Yeah, I mean, with Art Speak Creative for 2.5 years. We live here in Fort Worth, Texas. So I'm married to my wife of 18 years, and we're raising a 14-year-old son. So yeah, it's an exciting season for us at home, and we love the local church and serving and active and involved in our church here in Fort Worth. And excited to be with your audience today to share some tools, and I think bring some insight. I think can really help connect those dots where you feel like you might be missing reaching the audience that God's intended for you.
Oh, well, that is great. And again, thank you so much. And let me tell you, Jeremy, right now, I'm experimenting. So I thank God that you are the first person on, our multiple streaming live at one time, video wise. Normally, we're multiply streaming, on a podcast, anywhere you can listen to podcasts,
Sure.
online. But this is live, and we have added uh, 4 more live venues that people can see us do this podcast live and in person. So
Wonderful.
just bear with me, because I'm looking here, there, and everywhere at all of the other streaming sites while I am trying to uh, also do this interview with you. So thank you for your patience. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And good morning, everybody. Listen, share this because Jeremy and I are going to have a very powerful conversation about sharing the gospel, and it's sharing it, bringing in people to help brand your ministry, helping you tell your story, helping your community know who you are and that you're there for them. What are their hopes? What are their dreams? What are they, what is it that they feel that the church can add to help better the lives of the people that live in the region or the area or the community that they're serving? So Jeremy and his colleagues, they are experts at this because at one time, right, Jeremy, you were in ministry yourself. So can you share with us, your tenure in pastoring, and why you feel so compelled in trying to lift the weight off of senior pastors, local pastors in, you know, outreach and discipling and reaching the masses?
Sure, absolutely. So my season, I mean, I started out as re, got saved when I was 11. Didn't really go to church much when I was in junior high and high school. So I had that foundation and I had that experience with the Holy Spirit. And so that really kept me through junior high and high school years. Didn't make a lot of the poor choices that, a lot of my peers did. But I think really it's that encounter with God, even though I wasn't attending church, but I think that compass really knit to the heart of God. But out of high school, I rededicated my life to Jesus. At 19, I had found the church that I was attending loosely in high school. I had
Mhm,
found that my youth pastor had, the year that I graduated high school, had planted a church in our local community. So I
mhm,
went and found him, reconnected with him, and rededicated my life to Christ at 19. I was just working a 9 to 5 job,
mhm.
didn't know what I wanted to do, didn't have huge dreams and aspirations, and I just really knew really quickly about a year out of high school that I didn't know what I wanted for my life and where it was going. And so really that reconnection and relationship with Jesus really lit a fire under me. And so I started serving and we were a church. I mean, I think at the time we were 65 people meeting in a community center, South Seattle. And I started serving in children's ministry because that was the need. Now,
Mhm.
growing up, I was the baby of the family. So
Okay.
I was used to being treated as a baby around all my cousins and the older brother and things of that nature. And so didn't have any interaction with kids, didn't have any really interest in kids. I remember
Mhm.
when family members would have babies, they'd say, "Look at the baby, that's great." I never wanted to hold the baby, felt comfortable.
Right.
But there was an open door. We need someone to help with our elementary children. So I was 2 weeks into helping with elementary kids. And 2 weeks in, the person that was leading that classroom decided to step down and leave the church. So week 3, green as green can be in children's and student ministry, I was asked to lead that class. I remember the very first class that I led. Now at the time, our church was situated around of a lot of apartments. So like 8 huge apartment complexes, a lot of Section 8 housing, a lot of needs, a lot of single parent situations. So we had these families start to come into our church. And so at the time, our children's ministry was made up more of people coming in from the community than it
Mhm.
was people that were maybe that had been, members of the church. And so I remember that first opportunity I had to share with children, and they were so bored. I remember one kid literally started falling asleep and laid down across 3 chairs and went to sleep. And another kid raised their hand, "Excuse me, when's this going to be over? Because I'm really bored." So I
Mhm.
quickly learned that I had to really just really figure this out and engage kids. And through that, through just creativity and bringing in objects and bringing in just things that the kids could relate to and the things that could connect to, I realized, wow, that there is a power in breaking down these communication barriers. When I began to speak the language of children and start to minister and communicate the gospel in a way that they received it, I just realized that number one, I loved it. Number two, it just awakened something in me, my love and passion for children. So then we began to put teams together and go out into these apartments. And so I was working a full-time job. I worked right down the street from the church. So as soon as work was over, I just hung out at the church. And then I started going back into these apartment complexes and we developed teams. And so really we began to build almost what we called like apartment pastors. We had teams that were over these apartment complexes. And once or twice a week, we'd go through every single apartment complex and just knock on doors and talk to
Mhm,
families and pray with people. And
mhm.
then shortly after that, we started a busing program where we started bringing these children in for our Sunday school. So we started using at first church members' vans, and the church ended up having to buy some used airport shuttle bus. You know, those
Oh,
shuttle buses they pick you up at the airport. Bought a couple of those at an auction. To so quickly a year into this, we started bringing in about 50, 60 children just from our apartment complex.
oh,
These
wow.
apartment complexes. So we started bringing them in for church. And then a lot of them didn't have breakfast. So we started bringing them in a half hour early and started feeding them breakfast. And then shortly after that, we started seeing the parents. This is a great opportunity for parents to say, hey, I'm going to sleep in a whole morning without kids, ship my kids off to church. That's great. So after several months of that, we started having parents say, hey, I'm noticing some changes in my kids. My son or daughter wants to pray over the meal, wants to pray for her family members. And just I'm seeing the behavior change. And so then start to see we're not only picking up the children, but we're picking up the parents. And then we
Wow.
started realizing that they have a bunch of older siblings that we started funneling into youth ministry. So a few years into this, it just became evident that there's a call in my life, and pastor
Mhm.
confirmed that. And at the same time, moonlighted in Bible college. Went to Bible college at night and during the day, full time for 17 years. Didn't look back. And so again, it's kind of in children's and family and those urban contexts and environments. Was South Seattle, and then in Southern California is where I spent most of my time. But really, what I learned back then is the power of connection, the power of breaking down those walls and effective communication. And that's really what I feel, that I'm most passionate about. Is I took several missions trip. Took those same teenagers off to the missions field in places like central Mexico, where
Right,
4 hours away from the nearest tourist destination. But for us, learning the power of connection there is if we're going to the missions field, we need to understand these people. We need to
right,
understand where they're at. We need to understand what are this power of connection. What's some of that language, some of the phrases, some of those cultural to dos and to don'ts. That when we go into that environment, that we're already breaking down some of those barriers. And the fastest way to make connection is what Jason said. Jason talked about last week is empathy. Empathy says we have done the hard work to understand you. So
right,
therefore, when we take a step towards you in communication or towards ministry, that now that we come from a state of empathy, of understanding some of your pain points, understanding some of your hopes, dreams, and aspirations, to start creating some of that dialogue.
right.
And so, going to the missions field, doing that, that's the power of connection. But I think if us what I'm most passionate about in my role at ArtSpeak is helping local churches, urban context, suburban context, rural context, that if we take that approach, that our serving community and area is our missions field.
Wow.
And if we can take the intentional work, do some of the hard work up front, then we can start to lean into that empathy. And I get every pastor, leader, nonprofit that is on this call, you understand, you're in your community because you have a heartbeat for your community. Your heart breaks for what you see. You have
Right,
this righteous anger for what's going on in the world today, or what these families in that are going through in your community. And so who you are. You know the message that you're passionate about communicating, and you know some of your audience and that target that God's really called you to reach. But the I think the question and the connection that art speak does a beautiful job of, do the people out there know that?
right,
The
right.
people in your community, is it framed in a way where they can understand it through their language? They can
Mm,
understand that, even that when you communicate, do they feel, know, and sense that they're the center target of what God's called you to do and to reach them? Do they feel that in that communication? So that's kind of leads to that transition into serving in the local church, to now working with ArtSpeak, having the opportunity to work for the big K, the big kingdom, churches of all sizes, denominations, all across the United States, and life-serving organizations like that we're a part of, the Next Wave community with Steve Pike, and the amazing work that
right.
you and I get to be a part of in those conversations. Again,
Mm,
I check. You can leave this in the show notes, but go to nextwave.community, and a free month of this beautiful online community of church veterans, church planters, but those that really have the heart to really reach people in the 21st century, and that beautiful online community where there's training, teaching, weekly meetups on Wednesdays, but then also too, it's a place where you have a voice in the conversation around the church. You're going to have some ideas around the shared struggle, around the shared vision, and that conversation takes place in a beautiful way. And Danette, you know the power of that. We're on there and interacting and part of that community.
And so, like, your whole goal with you and your team at Art Speak, it is to help you build a brand for, for churches. That I was looking at some of the posts that you have on Facebook. And so there's the resolution movement that you did some work for them, right? And so they're on a mission. I love their mission, right? They're on a mission to bring hope and healing to the emerging generations, right, through brain science and biblical truth. I thought that that was very interesting, right? And so, I guess this is a part of how you help them develop their theme for what they're doing. Like, thriving is about good and meaningful relationship with God and others. And that stood out to me because we know for first foremost that discipleship is relational, right? And so, in order to disciple people, there must be some type of relationship. And you'll never be able to reach people. You'll never be able to have empathy for somebody that, in some type of way, there is no connection. Like, because you said connection is important, right? And so, like, for pastors that and ministries that are looking, especially since the pandemic, we've all been closed away from one another. But now it's time to get back to outreach and reaching our community and the masses, especially, I think, even with the thought of the isolation that we've experienced through the pandemic. How do we now, how do we now reconnect? You understand what I'm saying? With those that we started to connect with in the community, but the pandemic kind of, it cut all that off. But now it's time to emerge from this situation and reconnect. Tell us, Art Speaks thought on helping ministries reconnect.
Absolutely. And Danette, I love what you brought up about the resolution movement and some of that, those words and that phraseology. And so when we crafted that, that's some statements that we call those value propositions. Is
Mhm.
what is it that God, what is the grace, the gift, the calling, the anointing that God has given us as a ministry, as an organization? And
Mhm.
how do we communicate that in a conversational way for the people who need that message the most? And so that message that you wrote from Resolution Movement, and it caught your attention, it created intrigue. It
Right.
created intrigue because something in that statement leaned into, I can identify with that. I,
Mhm.
I understand. I understand people with that pain point. I want to lean into that because it creates intrigue. It's not just white language and just white noise. And so, to answer your question, I think that's a perfect example of really messaging that leans into empathy, that creates intrigue with those that are best suited to lean into that. So, I'd say that most churches, this is what most churches or organizations reach out to us. They fill out a form submission online and they say, "Hey, ArtSpeak team, we got a really bad website. Just don't really think it's working. We haven't updated it since 1995 and when
Mhm.
it was first set up. And I think our website's really bad. Or we haven't, which I think it's time to refresh our logo. I think it's kind of outdated in the colors and it just doesn't look great. We want something that's fresh. We want something that's relevant to maybe this next generation." So the good thing I think about the pandemic is a lot of leaders and church pastors and organizational leaders, it's caused them to think about what matters most. I was
Yes.
working with an organization called the Future Church Company, and they create their movement that helps churches kind of flesh out processes leading to greater discipleship. And they were saying that before the pandemic, that in the poll of pastors around the U.S., that the top priorities and the emphasis for their church, discipleship was 18th on the list. Number 18 out of every concern every issue, maybe everything that the church is thinking about. And now in this last 18
Number
months, it's moved.
18
It's
on the
it's
list.
18 down on the list of priorities, or
Right.
the things that pastors felt was the most important for their ministry.
Wow.
Hey,
And
because
so,
they thought, hey, we're already doing discipleship. We got this covered. But then the pandemic has helped them think through things different. So now it's in the top. I think number 4 is what they said. It's in the
oh,
top things because it's got pastors to stop and think, how are we effective?
right,
What we've done in the past, is it effective? Maybe it's time to make some tweaks. So when they reach out to us, it's either a website or it's something tangible, it's visual. And so when we get on this phone calls, and pastor leader, help us understand, for us, everything starts with the messaging. That messaging is the cornerstone of everything that we do.
right,
So for us, website would be the end result. That's going to be a great tool. But if you just have a website with updated colors or a fresh logo,
right.
but it doesn't make that empathetic connection, that website is not going to be the most effective tool. So everything it goes for us in that conversation goes back to communication. And
Mm,
that's where we start that conversation, is if we can really nail down, again, who are we? What is our message? And
mhm.
who is our audience? And we know as a church, it's not realistic for us to say, well, we're just called to reach everybody. It's
Right.
like yes and no. As you know, everybody that walks into the doors of your church, you would hope that they would feel welcome in that environment. But that
Mm,
doesn't mean that your message needs to go solve every problem, connect with everybody in your community. But it's really helping. The messaging is helping define who has God really called us to reach. In the urban context, it could be in a city block. In a
mm,
suburban context, it could be a 5 or 10 mile radius. So within your serving radius, really, who is that audience, and kind of reverse engineer that. Then let's now frame in communication and just make it easy to open those conversations and make it easy to invite those people to church. So I would say is really getting clear on that messaging foundation. And again, if we go to the missions field and we're going to spend 6, 8, 10 weeks, a quarter, really learning and understanding and phrases and language and culture and empathy, what if the church took that kind of intentionality towards reaching their local community? We're going to spend working with a team like ArtSpeak, walking through that communication framework for 4 weeks, 6 weeks, to
mm,
have that communication to where now we have this blueprint. We now have this document that comes out to about 18 to 20 pages that helps formulate and craft in that communication, so that when we communicate through a message series that we're creating, we
mhm.
communicate through a Facebook post or social media, or we have emails that are going out, or that we're
Right.
going to our local chamber of commerce and connecting with other businesses in our community.
Mhm,
What if we had those the empathetic language and that messaging that we can connect at every level and every opportunity that we have, that's pointed, that creates intrigue? And I think the challenges that a lot of churches are facing is communication has been like white noise. And I don't mean to undermine church communication, but it can be very much, hey, join us online, come to
right.
our church. It's going to be great. So it's either it's kind of white noise because every church in America is every church down the street are saying the same things. So it's not
Right.
creating this value of you leaning into that specific audience. Or so it's
Mhm,
either white noise language. I think that's a hill that churches have to overcome, or it's language that speaks insider language. Now, you
mm,
and I, and many of and most of our listeners today, that you've been in the church world for a long time, you know what you have experienced: redemption and forgiveness and God's power and anointing, and celebrate things like taking communion together and baptisms and breakthrough, and we understand what it's like to being washed in the blood. But if you say, hey, come and being washed in the blood to the people in the community, like, wow, what kind of crazy sacrificial cult is that? So I think sometimes that the things that we've come, if we just communicate, Danette, if we just communicate more of what we love, God's presence, the anointing, the Holy Spirit, His power, redemption, if we speak that to the community and just communicate what we love by being on the inside for so long, people in our community either A, are going to be, well, I don't understand that. That's foreign language to me. I don't understand it. Or what does that have to do with my life? I mean, I'm trying to raise my kids, and it's a struggle, and trying to
yes.
figure all these things out, and I want better for my kids, and I feel like that I'm not providing that for my
Yes.
family, and I'm trying to figure life out. What does that have to do with me? or
Right.
some of those words can be triggers of, ooh, I experienced that growing up, and that wasn't safe for me. It wasn't a healthy expression for me. I felt like it's confused, and it
Right.
didn't connect with me, and that's exactly maybe why I've left the church.
Wow. Now
Um,
let me say this too, Jeremy, in what you are saying, because it's so good, everything you're saying, right? And because many pastors, they're trying to think of how can I come up with the next plan that will take, us to the level of what we have envisioned for our ministry, right? And
sure.
so we're so worried about creating this next plan, but I saw this morning a quote by Bob Goff, right?
Hmm.
And he says, "You don't need a plan. You just need to be present," right? And so we're planning, but we really need to be present. What you said about it goes back to that, communication or and connection. But we're planning, like we got so many plans going on in our head that is wearing us out, right? Like, well, how can let's have a planning meeting to do this, and let's have a planning meeting to do that, but we need to be in looking, understanding what Bob is saying, that we don't need a plan. But over the years, for most of us as pastors, we've been thinking about how can we come up with the next great plan, right? But really, it's not about a plan, it's about being present. So do how does Art Speak help a ministry, a pastor, a team, volunteers? Because y'all also help strengthen, the volunteer core of ministry. And that's something that we definitely need in ministry right now, because we don't have a lot of volunteers.
Sure.
People will not work as hard if they're not getting paid. You understand what I'm saying? So there are ministries that can pay, right, for people to do everything they need done. So, of course, they're going to have this, you know, look of excellence going on because people are getting paid. But for many of us that are in urban communities and we're trying to, grow our church and reach the masses, we can't pay people. So we
Sure.
need to strengthen our volunteers, right? So we have, people that are listening and on this live, and I've seen people put in some amazing comments, right? And so one of the comments was, teach us how to carry the weight, how to carry the worry. You know what I'm saying? So, like, this is, some of volunteers are asking. So, you and your group, Art Speak, like, show us how to put the plan down and be in place, rather more so than the plan, but be more present, you know what I'm saying, in what it is that we envision. Because is it that Art Speaks helps the leader take the vision and then and help them see that the vision is more through being present, connection, communication, more so than people coming inside, which you did talk about, that like everybody is not going to understand the language of being, washed in the blood of Jesus, or, so forth and so on. So, like, my goal for this conversation is to really help myself and my peers have an understanding. Number one, because for many years I had the wrong perception of branding. But
Sure.
then you have people who do brand, but it's about making you look good on the website, or the colors, how you look attractive on social media. But what I love about the concept of Art Speak is that Art Speak is a group of people who've been in ministry that knows the ups and downs of reaching people and discipling people. And so y'all are allowing God to use y'all in this area of marketing per se, branding people, but it's all based on discipling. And so that's what I love. It's not based on, making the pastor or the church look good. It's about branding Jesus Christ through your church.
I love it. Yeah, Danette, I'll definitely speak into that, and I think it'd be helpful for some of your listeners today. If the end goal is for us as a local church or a life-giving organization to reach people, that's the end goal, is to create what we call the shared win, is that our local church or organization wins when the people in our community wins. If we go back to just really briefly what Jason talked about last week is that communications triangle. If we looked at communication in a triangle, the bottom left corner is going to be you and your organization. Bottom right side of the triangle is going to be those in your community that you're best suited to reach but haven't reached yet. That gap between you and that gap between them is influence.
Mm,
And we call that
mm,
the influence gap. Is it
mm,
either A, they've as again, it's again goes back to communication. We have there's a communication problem here, and there's a communication receptive problem here on the side of people that we're reaching. So again, if it's white noise, if it's insider language, if what we're saying is not empathetic and it's more about us, come join us, be a part of us. We're doing
mm,
this thing. Our thing is amazing. And then is your thing amazing? Absolutely, it's amazing. But when we lean into empathy, it leans into you, your problems, your hopes, your dreams, your hangups, the things that make you up, because we're going on a journey as a church. The families in our community are going on a journey. They're going somewhere. We're going somewhere. The how communication creates that intersection. That when
mhm,
we have effective communication and we communicate through empathy, it closes that communications gap. That when they hear messaging, they go on our website and they see faces and people and stories and the words that connect to them is that people now begin to think, maybe I should give the church another try. Maybe I'm wrong. Sounds like this church, and subconsciously they're thinking, maybe this church, maybe there's hope. Maybe there is a church that understands me. What they're communicating sounds a little bit like my story. So if the goal is for us to reach people, the starting point is for us to make a connection. So empathy creates that open dialogue that makes it easy for people to be invited to church. And again, it's specific pointed messaging that connects to a pain point, connects to a fear, connects to, hey, I really want to overcome in life. I like what you're saying enough to where I'm going to either go online, watch a sermon, I'm going to check out service some point soon, or create that initial dialogue. Where ArtSpeak comes in is we help with that communication framework. It comes to be about an 18-page communication write-up where it takes your mission, vision, your values, and how do we now create this clear messaging that creates that dialogue of who are we as a ministry, where are the needs in our community, and how do we open up those communication dialogue. We get on a churches will fill out a questionnaire. As a matter of fact, that questionnaire is free. If you go to artspeakcreative.com,
mhm,
you can scroll down and find that questionnaire. You can put in your address, and I'll see that. So if you ever want to communicate, we'll have that on file, and we can continue to send you some valuable resources. But that questionnaire is the types of questions we're going to ask, and we're going to ask those. You're going to fill out that questionnaire. If you want to do work with ArtSpeak, then we'll get on that phone call and we'll dialogue that through with you. And we just want to hear the heart of the organization leader, the heart of the pastor, about your community, as much as you can tell us about your church and who God's called you to reach. Then we begin to formulate and work with you to craft the strategic messaging blueprint. And it comes out to, again, all of this language and phrases and verbs, and it's formulated. And even we do research. So we do research on your demographics, whether it's a 3 city blocks or it's 15 suburban mile radius, whatever it is that you feel like is your serving context. And we
mhm,
begin to do demographic research. Who are these people in your serving area? So we're going to learn a lot about you and a lot about what you interact and know about the community and the people in it. And we're going to do some outside research that's going to be beneficial. Oftentimes, it just reinforces what you're saying, but we also pull research. We work with a company and we pull a report called psychographics. Psychographics is a report that helps us understand, how do people in your serving area think? What are
right,
they afraid of? What matters most to them? What is their church upbringing? What are the hangups that they have now? So all of this research and time with you begins to help frame in that communications triangle to where we can help create that shared win and close that communications gap. And I would say, so once we have that, we work with you, we create a draft, our writing team creates a draft, we get on a call with you and work that through and fine tune and tweak that. And generally we have that process wrapped up in about 6 weeks. And so
mm,
then now that begins the powerful framework of going back to your question that you asked. There's a lot going on in ministry. There's a lot of meetings. There's a lot of decisions to be made, and all of this stuff is well, good intention. But what that
Mhm.
strategic messaging begins to do is help narrow in and frame in what we do best, frame in how we communicate that, and then frame in the people that God's called us to reach. And so it creates things like personas. And actually, I'll read a persona from, and this is from a messaging blueprint from an actual client. So we've come to find in their community through research, through connecting with the pastor, through studying their community, is this would be a family persona of what makes up their community. Ryan and Joanna are a millennial couple. They're hungry for a real church experience. They have questions about faith that can be wrestled with. Who wants to know more? They want a place to belong without being used. They want to be answer. They want answers to. They want to be the answer to the pandemic of racism. This is from an urban context. And another persona we found is Antonia is a young single mom. She has troubled past, has struggled with substance abuse, has been
Mhm.
in and out of abusive relationships, has never experienced a healthy church environment before, and
Mm.
knows there's something more than what her current life is offering. So if you now, through this process, you start to get very focused on these people. Who are their hopes? What are their
Right.
dreams? What are their aspirations? So that now when we start to frame, so what this produces is not just marketing message or opening up the conversations, but it formulates how we do ministry. And these are
Mm.
some examples from Living the Word Church in East St. Louis. If anybody knows anything about East St. Louis, it's a very hard place, very urban place, uh, urban environment, tackling racism, tackling poverty, tackling a lot of hopelessness in their community. So
Mhm.
when they, so when I would say go on their website, living the word. I think it's livingtheword.org, I believe. Pastor
Mhm.
David Hawkins. As a matter of fact, Danette, he would be a phenomenal guest on your podcast.
Wow.
So go ahead and look at him, and if you're interested, he's a great friend of ArtSpeak, a great friend of Jason, the owner of ArtSpeak, and I think we can probably make that happen. One of our clients, but what I would like to say about kind of really answering your question full circle is he's taken his messaging blueprint, again,
Mm.
mission, vision, values, and then the clarity on their messaging and their audience, and he's now used that to formulate their ministry. Their
Wow.
budget, their budget is set around these families. Our budget, these families, and there's more personas in their profile, but our budget needs to go to A, solve these problems, or B, that bring solutions to the hope that these people have that have yet connected to their God destiny. So now become very, very focused and very targeted. How can we create ministry that serves and reaches and connects to these families and gives them, through through our local church, being part of the community and part of the journey together by helping answer their questions and help speak into their hopes and dreams. So then
Mm.
that not only formulates marketing and what you see on their website and that message that goes out there and that invitation message, but it goes full circle to how they do ministry. So it's from budgeting, it's from how they set up their leadership structure, the
Mm.
positions that they have, the people that they pay for, the teams that they develop. But if it
Mhm.
can't solve these problems, they don't do it as a ministry. They don't have this program. They don't
Wow.
do this thing if it's not pointed back to solving one of these problems. So then now they're able to so then when people come to their church, hey, I want to start this ministry. Hey, I want to do this thing. Why don't we do that? Then he goes back into, we don't do that because God has positioned us in this community to help meet these needs, to minister to these people. And so when they do ministry, when they communicate, these are the faces they have in mind. It's Ryan and Joanna and their family.
Right.
It is that single mother who is struggling, who has yet to ever find a life-giving church, but she's been through every rehab, every help out there in the world in her community to find hope, but is yet to find it through a local church. So David Hawkins and Living the Word, if we can communicate that, we're going to say no to a lot of things because we're going to say yes to what God's called us to do so that we can intersect with these people on this journey and create that win for their life. And then what messaging also does is that helps solve. So that's going to eliminate a lot of meetings, Jeanette. I might have just freed some people up here on this call. That's gonna That's gonna give permission, pastors and leaders, to eliminate a lot of meetings, and it's going to give you permission to do things that maybe you haven't, when you have that clarity and that calm confidence of this is who we are. And a lot of times pastors will say yes to a lot of good things because they haven't really clarified the great things. But when you can clarify the great things, you can say no to a lot of good things, knowing there's other organizations and churches in the community that are going to serve those needs. But we can really lean in and get honed in. And then with volunteers, oh, Danette, if I would have had this process when I was in ministry, I'm telling you what. But I'm going to help some people out here. Is it this
Please
framework?
help. Please
With
help.
this framework,
We
it's
desperately need volunteers.
oh my word, 95 in all of my time in student and family ministries on my team, even though we had some great ministries, large ministries doing all kinds of stuff, I had a part-time I had a part-time administrator for 20 hours a week to help put all of the stuff into processes. And so I had to do everything by teams. I had to build teams. And so I would say, to having this framework, the benefit to team building is that people will give their life because they're compelled by
Mm,
story. They're compelled by the mission. That I know we're not paying you for this, but if we can paint that vision of that journey that we're taking people on, and the eternal impact they're going to have for their life, the crowns that we're going to have in heaven. I told children's workers, painted such a compelling picture that in heaven, that God's going to give you he's going to give you a golden shuttle bus in heaven to drive around in. If you were to drive shuttle bus here on earth, that if you were to help out in the toddler room, and these families and these broken people that we're reaching, and the hope that you're going to give those families, that you're going to have crowns. You're going to have crowns of gold gummy bears and goldfish crackers in your crown for helping in heaven, for helping these people out. So I think
right.
that if we have that compelling vision and we know the journey, we can paint the picture of these families that we're reaching. Would you consider joining me on this journey to make that impact to these families? So if we can get really clear to our volunteers and potential volunteers,
Mhm,
and where they're compelled by that story, that when they go in that children's classroom, it's not just let's help kids prevent from killing each other for the next hour and a half, or throwing stuff or crying or whatever. But if we can now formulate and fashion ministry around
mm,
this personas,
mm,
ministry around the pain point, and then we can begin to formulate our teams. Then for children's ministry, well, what does that environment need to look like if we're going to reach these kind of families? If this mom is coming in and she doesn't feel safe, she doesn't feel trusted by the church, then how do we help that mom feel trusted in our ministry? What are
mhm,
colors, and what are the types of people that need to be present? What are the
mm,
types of the environment we need to have for kids to help mom within 30 seconds to gain trust in our environment?
right.
What kind of qualifications do our workers need to have? What kind of countenance on the face that people have? What kind of curriculum do we need to have? What kind of paint on the walls do we need to have? What are those people that we're looking for in children's ministry, that we don't have to say yes to everyone? We're saying that we formulate such a plan for our ministry around strategic messaging, and that communication is that now that we're looking at the lenses, can these volunteers fulfill that through this clarity, through the
Mm,
questions that we ask, through maybe
mm,
where their heart's at? And that gives us permission as ministry to say, you know what, I feel that you're best suited for this ministry over here, because clarity has shown you that that is not the best fit for them. And
right.
so I would say that, it's not the silver bullet. I know that there's a lot of leadership, and there's a lot of other things. We're not the magic bullet, but I think that clarity and that communication, taking the mission, vision, values, and getting really clear on how that we start that conversation with people, how we invite them to church, but not just that. How does it come back around full circle to where messaging formulates how we do ministry?
Mm, mm. Wow, that's so powerful. And
And just
so,
like a Jesus, right? To the Jesus model of volunteering. Come follow me. We're
right.
going to be on this great journey. And I think there's a lot of undervaluing the shoulder tapping. Come
Mm,
follow me. We're going to do something great for the world. We're going to do something great for God. Would you give me a season? Would you give me 3 months? Try it out. Work the process with us and see if you could make a difference along with us. I think that's
right.
the beauty of ministry. That let's get enough of that foundational process. But I think what Bob Goff said, we just need to work out loving people, work out connecting with people. But that foundation does give you that confidence to how to do it in a way where it's most effective for your ministry.
So, in one of your quotes here, it says your message is the answer for someone, but when you're talking to everyone, you're really talking to no one. Please help me with that one.
Yeah, that goes back to really that kind of that white noise, and I think that sometimes is a tension for some ministries, is we don't want to exclude people, so we're going to cast out this amazing huge net, hoping we're going to catch, or we're going to
Okay, I
we're
got
going to we're going to capture everybody. So I think when we have strategic messaging, and that it really allows us to really,
that's
it allows us to create the wins in ministry. Is that
that
if you're kind of reaching everybody, it's kind of vague, and then what we're able to measure is vague. But when we get very pointed, very strategic, and knowing that these are the people that we're best suited to reach, this is our gifting, our grace, the anointing. This is the team that we have, and the heart of our pastor and our ministry. If we just communicate some pointed things there, and every church has. If you think of every church, your people, it's a target. The center of your target are those people that you're best suited to reach. Then you
mm,
have those outer rings. If, let's say, you're a church that reach college and young adults and young professionals, and that's kind of who you're best suited to reach in your serving area, that would be the center target of your ring. But that outer ring might be retired couples,
mm,
early retired couples in their 50s, empty nesters, but they're still youthful enough. They love
right,
the next generation. Maybe they had served in ministry somewhere back in the day, or they were reached when they were in college, and they know the impact of that season. And so for them on that outer ring, that might be, hey, that we're not in our 20s, but we sure love 20-year-olds. We love a young, vibrant, energetic church. We love the vibrant expression of younger worship. So you're going to have maybe those 3 or 4 rings. And so that and the communications messaging, it is pointed, it is strategically pointed towards that target, but then also to its messaging. What are those other outer rings? We don't want to exclude that. We want to invite them into the conversation as well. So that messaging is strategic, but that messaging also is flexible to speak to these other voices, like Steve Pike, who's always going to want to be in the youngest church in his area.
yeah. And again, we would like Steve to post the Next Wave community link, um, and take the offer on the free trial and just look in the community. I'm in the community. Art Speak Creative is a part of the community, and it's a wonderful community to connect to. So check it out with us. We're going to ask Steve to, post that again. But what you are saying, I was looking at, so of course I saw I was looking at a church start where before they started the church, they started serving first. This was a something that was on Exponential with Steve and Jason. And it was a church of Ray Hudson. I don't know if you know about him, and I might be asking you the question when you might not know much about it because you didn't do the interview. But what I did like about when I was looking at the interview, they were in a place where 99% of the people were not interested in, in faith at all, no interest at all. But what they did before they ever opened up their church facility was that they were serving the community and, reaching the community before, they even launched the ministry. And
Sure.
so, I mean, again, you talked about Jesus's model for volunteers, but I also think that that was Jesus' model before the birth of the church, right? Is that
Absolutely.
before the launch, before Pentecost. You understand what I'm saying? And so that was his way of serving the people. You understand what I'm saying? Before the launch, right? So,
Absolutely. They're
yeah,
find a need and fill it. And it runs, and I know who he is, but I don't know his journey and his story. But it does remind me of a church that we're working with in a suburb. It's about 40 miles, I believe, south of Atlanta, in Griffin, in the city of Griffin there. But they're a 3-year-old church. The year before they launched the church, they bought an old bread truck and they put a wrap on it, but they started serving free ice cream almost,
mm,
I think, multiple days of the week. They
is that
started going around and they started giving out free ice cream, and they're in a
right?
very much Yeah,
That's the
I'm
ice
sorry.
cream truck.
Yeah, so they might have alluded to that story.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
that. Yeah,
Pastor Josh Abernathy.
that
Uh,
story.
yeah, so they for a year they started just going around and they were on a proverbial a railroad track town. It's race and economics and challenges and issues are divided by different worlds and different life and different needs and different tensions, and so he felt, what divides or what builds bridges. I don't care what color of your skin, I don't care what neighborhood you live in, your background, your upbringing, whether you who you voted for in this last election, everybody loves ice cream. So
Every
let's build a bridge with ice cream. And that today is one of the foundations of their ministry, is that before they were known as the church, they were known as the people that just give ice cream out everywhere. So absolutely.
Wow, and you know what? That's so powerful because I did read about that. And so they had like an old UPS truck and they
Yeah.
turned
Yep.
the truck into an ice cream truck. And so that's what they did. They went out and gave the ice cream, and there was a quote on also. I did a lot of reading, of course, now you could tell by me talking.
Yeah.
Um, it one of the quotes from somebody on here was a John Mark Comer, but it wasn't about their story, but I still tie it in with their story. Is that attention, right? Attention
That's right.
is the way that well, he says if you have someone's attention, that you're on a journey with them towards life change. So attention is the beginning of devotion. But what a powerful strategy in the way these pastors got the people's attention, right? That was the beginning of devotion through the ice cream, because they got the people's attention through giving out this free ice cream. That's so smart. The Bible says, "He that winneth souls is so wise," right? And so, these tools and I think we need to hear more of these things, because many leaders and pastors, we may not understand just how out of bounds or out of the box we can go with reaching people and connecting with people and communicating with people, and the other thing is too, um, Jeremy, that for many of the churches in our communities, we're so, I guess, we're so, we lack financial resources. So even if we had a truck, right, to give out ice cream, to be honest, most of us would ask for donations for the ice cream, which wouldn't be still, I think, a strategy in getting people's attention. You understand what I'm saying? It would be like a fundraiser for the church, and so for churches who really financially, they don't have a leg barely to stand on. Like, how would Art Speak serve these churches, that really are broke? I mean,
Sure. Absolutely. I understand that.
yeah.
And I was on staff at a very small church, to where when I came on staff, they they said, "Hey, we can't afford to give you a salary, but
Hmm.
what we're going to do is for the next year, the pastor says, I'm going to send letters out to our 25 most faithful givers and tithers. Ask them if
Hmm.
they would sow a seed." And so, literally, for the first year, it was offerings that paid my salary. These people said, "We will commit to give above and beyond towards Jeremy's salary to bring him on."
Hmm.
So for us, I know that that God is creative, and when God's put something on your heart, there's no man, there's no man, there's no lack, there's no shortage. So I think sometimes we have to shift, and we have to lift our eyes. Is it, where is our faith? Where is our confession that we serve the God of abundance? And the Bible also says, when we the steps of the righteous are ordered by the Lord. So when God's put something in our heart to reach people, to reach our community, it's just taking that next step, that next faith step. What can I believe? You may not believe for an ice cream truck now, but can you believe in a partnership
Yeah,
to somebody to help fund ice cream? So I think, again, God works in steps. God works in order. Are we faithful with taking those faith steps? You can't be moved by what we see in ministry. But are we moved more by the heart of God that He's put in us, that He's going to be the abundant supplier? He is going to meet us exactly where we're at. He's going to meet us to our level of faith. He's going to meet us to our level of vision. But I understand the pain points now and the challenges are now. So I would say with art, so I think the starting place with ArtSpeak is if you go to artspeakcreative.com, that if you go to the box on the top right corner, it says let's talk. Just go and fill out that web form. Just say, hey, Jeremy, I met you on this call, this week. Send me that free questionnaire. So I'm going to send you a questionnaire, and it's going to be it's that several page questionnaire, and it's going to be those clarifying questions. Who are we? What are we called as a church? And so just that free questionnaire alone is
Mhm.
going to be a powerful tool, whether you engage in us in the process or not. But those who
Yeah,
just feel like, hey, we want to lean into it. We know that this process is going to be an investment of time and finances. And again, there's churches that are ready for that. You might be ready down the road, but at least that questionnaire is going to give you a starting place. It's going to give you a tool and a resource. If you go on our website, you go to the resources tab, tons and tons of articles and anything you want to know about communication and serving the local church and understanding marketing and branding and reaching people. We invest a lot of time and effort into providing valuable content for the people that are just looking for those tips. We had somebody reach out to us that says, hey, I printed every single article that you've ever produced on your website and created a book. She showed us a book this thick and put it in a
wow,
3-ring binder. And she said, I guess I'm at the point now I need to start paying for something. So,
wow,
hey, if you want to download everything and that's a value to you, I think there's some valuable resources. But if it makes sense to, hey, I want to lean in, you can just fill out that form submission there and just say, hey, request that downloadable. I'll shoot that right over to you. Or, hey, we want to talk, find out a little bit more. What could that pricing look like? How
right.
does working with ArtSpeak work?
So, well, we have had a powerful conversation this morning. I didn't even realize we only got 2 minutes left, right? And
Whoa.
right, and we're just having this great conversation. But I was very excited to see that you have done some work in Philly, right? And the post says Philly needs a little grit, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
thought that Philly already had a lot of grit, right? And so um, but in closing, right, you did some work with Transform Church in Philadelphia, Transform Church Philly. And so, like, speak to us because this is where we are. We're in Philly. So, you guys have done some work here in Philly. In closing, we have like 60 seconds left, but I'll give you 2 minutes, right? So you can 12:01.
This is
Uh,
my
I,
this is my this is my second closing, Danette.
yes.
All right. Well, yeah, no, Jason, the owner of ArtSpeak, I believe, went to Bible college. So there was a great connection there when he was launching his church. But we helped them with a campaign, Philly Quits, and it was and and you're showing this. I can get this from Jason and link the landing page to you so you can check it out. It's a campaign that's closed out now, but it was Philly Quits, and so we worked with the pastor in creating a campaign. They want to do something in September. Is it what do we need to help people quit? So they identify there's some addictions and strongholds and some wrong habits that the people who are living out in their life, hitting the ceiling and not getting past in life because these addictions and these hangups were holding them back. So what if we create an intriguing series around these addictions, these hangups, and these things? So we'll link the landing page when I find that and send that over to you, Danette. But it was a campaign that we created a sermon series, and then it was this interactive, and you can even type in it. It was a form that says "I quit whatever." I quit smoking. I quit gossip. I quit pornography. I quit backbiting. And so
Mhm.
as this interactive, you can share that on your social media to make a declaration as I vow to quit this. And then there
Mhm.
was every week the pastor would upload that sermon. That sermon would be right there, and would direct people from Facebook ads to that. And then the
Mhm.
pastor created a free downloadable resource on how to overcome addictions and strongholds in your life. And so that sermon's just, I want to say, and hopefully I get the numbers correctly. I think if not, it'll be really clear. I think the church was experiencing around 250, 275 people before that campaign. And after that campaign, the church had never seen a dip under 500 people, just because that specific messaging, that pointed empathetic communication really leaned into meeting a tremendous targeted need in their community that begin to nurture and to help and to cultivate to this day.
Wow. Wow.
So that's the power of communication. That's the power of Philly's a big place, it's a big city, a lot of different needs. Every neighborhood's probably going to have a different extension of who they could reach or different flavors. But if we just not necessarily focus on just the color of people's skin or those contexts, but in this case, let's focus on what's the shared struggle with the people in our community. How can we solve that problem through a sermon series and invite people into that conversation and create that shared win?
Wow. Well, this was so powerful, so good, so good. And again, I thank you for being with us today. Thank you for your patience while I was, you know, experimenting today on this new platform.
Sure.
And so glad we got to reach everybody, even on our podcast, Apple, iHeart Radio, Google Play, but even live on our both of our Facebook pages, YouTube, and Twitter. So thank you everyone that listened to us from anywhere you listen to us on today. Please pray for my co-host, Pastor Clay. He was under the weather on this week, but please pray for his strength and for his speedy recovery. He is recovering. And so thank you everyone again. Jeremy, thank you, thank you, thank you. Don't forget to check out Art Speaks Creative. .com or .org?
.com, yeah, .com, and yeah, hit the Let's Talk button. Any way I can resource you or help you, or give
.com,
you some
and
tools.
it
I'd love
doesn't
to start
cost
that conversation.
talk, right?
So
So hit the Let's Talk button and put your questions there. And you will definitely hear from either Jeremy, Jason, or somebody from the team. So thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend. And thank you for tuning in to the Urban Leadership Post podcast.